In three, two, one, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are in the world. Welcome back for a very special episode of the Conflict Management Show. I am Mr. I am the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Half Man, Half Amazing, the awkward, awesome one, Mr. Main Event, Malik Miles. How are y'all doing? And my co-host of this grand show.
Future Hall of Famer, one namer, the answer, everything in between. And we're back once again to preview UFC 309. And you're going to get us started this week.
Yeah, it's gonna be a spectacular show. The greatest of all time versus the greatest heavyweight of all time. Legacy versus legacy. Legend versus legend. It doesn't get any bigger than this. Then the grandest stage of them all, the WrestleMania of combat sports, Madison Square Garden in New York. It's one of the fascinating things is that fun fact, John Jones, for as great as he is, did you know he has never fought in New York or in his home state of New York or Madison Square Garden? This will be his very first time fighting in in MSG, which is crazy to me.
Well, I think that part of that was, if you remember, there was a while there where New York was the last kind of holdout
Hmm.
for MMA for whatever reason. The politics of that particular commission were holding out and not allowing the UFC access, and they were part of that whole trouble that the UFC went through in like the 2000s of trying to get legalization and trying to get the public kind of educated on what the sport is and that it's not just like insane back alley uh what they
Fisticuffs.
yeah, like it's not to the death basically. It's
Yeah.
not some like kumite stuff. It's an actual sport.
Yeah, it's not just like Fight Club. They're not being like, "Hey, enter the Thunderdome." It's
Yeah,
it's
it's
really the
people.
best martial artists in the world testing themselves. It's if you put a wrestler versus a wrestler versus a kickboxer, or a jiu-jitsu guy versus a karate guy. What is the top? If you put the two best guys in the world, two baddest men on the planet, who comes out on top? And I feel like there is no better example than this, right?
Mm,
Where a lot of times I feel like in our sport, right, or in just combat sports in general, whether it's boxing, MMA, karate, whatever it may be, right? We always like to make these like hypotheticals when you look at these legends, like, oh, who would have won, like Muhammad Ali versus Mike Tyson? Even though those two are like the two best boxers of all time, and I know they get put into these fantasy matches, even though they were from two different eras. You will never know, right?
mm.
We say like Anderson Silva versus GSP, but I think this is the closest we'll ever get to a Ali versus Tyson. You know what I mean? Like, who's like, if we put the best against the best, because it's a heavyweight fight for the belt against a guy who stacks up pretty close to like Muhammad Ali is like the greatest technician, the greatest of all time. Muhammad Ali was also called the greatest of all time. John Jones, 17 world titles, 16 world titles, 17 title wins, youngest champion at 23 years old, oldest champion on the roster at 37, two division weight champion, most finishes in UFC history against a guy like Mike Tyson himself with the knockout power, a knockout artist. Stipe Miocic, 20 and 4, 15 of his 20 wins have been by knockout. So if you got 20 wins and 15 are by knockout, I think that makes you a knockout artist, two-time heavyweight champion, four heavyweight title defenses. If he wins, he'll be a three-time heavyweight champion, which is crazy to like win the belt, lose the belt, fight your way back up, get the belt again, fight your way back up again at like, you know. So it's really the two literal baddest dudes on the planet going head to head for the biggest prize of them all, the World Heavyweight Championship. Um, it's I think it doesn't get any bigger than this. I think this will be the biggest fight card that we've had all year. How do you think that they stack up? I like before I give my opinions, I'm very curious to hear what you think because I have my own opinions. But yeah,
I think I agree with you that this is the biggest fight in terms of resumes and kind of legacy that you could put on paper right now. But I've been really, I guess, surprised by how vocal the fans that have been in attendance at the press conferences and stuff have been about Aspinall. Like, I understood that uh, he was going to get media questions about it, and I knew that it was a larger narrative that was out there. And Tom's done a really good job of putting it out there and making sure that he's putting himself in a position to be next for it and get the kind of mandate of the masses to go out there and be the next one to fight for the belt, regardless of who it is or what the circumstances are. Um, but yeah, I was just surprised at how well the fans have taken on to it, and I think part of that is because of how John has chosen. It's we've talked about this before um with like Bilal and guys like that, where at some point, kind of later in their career, they've just decided to do promotion now, and this week feels like John's promoting the fight, whether he's doing it intentionally or he's doing it as a part of his ritual to get himself ready for the fight. He's unironically done a really good job of making himself very unlikable to most of the fans and setting up his next fight after this if he were to win. So that's been really bizarre to me because I'm used to like we're fans of the generation of John Jones when John Jones was a guy who was excellent to watch his technique and how he fought and his adjustments and all that stuff, but was terrible at promotion and nobody really cared. It's he cleaned out his division and people just thought I'm I'm not interested in what John Jones is going to do because he's just going to win. So everybody kind of stopped tuning in for a while and said, "Ah, that's not really interesting. John will beat him." Or even when John was messing up, the the kind of narrative was, we've gotten tired of him. We've seen enough of him. He's like a screw up, so we're gonna move on. But however he's done it, whether it's completely on accident or 100, he's done a really good job with promotion in the lead up to the fight and promoting his possible next fight. Uh, I know I answered like three questions you didn't ask in there, but I just wanted to give credit because normally we don't get fight weeks like this where there's so much promotion before the fight even happens, where you're looking at who the main event could be up against next. It's usually the guys want to, stay focused on the guy of the now. But and John said that this week, but the way that he's gone about it has led to more questions rather than answers and patience from the fans and the media. So that's been really interesting. And kind of the way that he's gone about this has made this feel personal in a way. Because John keeps referencing that, oh, Stipe said something about uh, my kids. And the only thing that I've seen anyone bring up or be able to show was that on a podcast, Stipe was talking about uh, how he would like more recognition from the UFC, but it's fine with him because as long as his kids look at him and don't think that he's like a screw up or something like that, then he's fine. He never mentioned John within the context of the clip. It didn't look like he referenced him in any way or was like being sneaky about it. He wasn't like there was no way to infer that particularly he was talking about him based on the clip I saw. So, and the other part of it, and normally you just say, oh, well, John's getting himself hyped up for the fight, which I do believe. But then I saw a clip, someone was talking to DC, and DC said that Stipe was legitimately upset after they had their ceremonial weigh-in face-off, where John Jones said, "Don't ever talk about my kids," and Stipe said, "I didn't." So this has somehow become personal because I think in Stipe's mind, this fight was going to be respectful and straightforward. And I think if there's something that gets under Stipe's skin, I don't think that going directly at him annoys him. I think that in his mind, he goes, "Oh, well, you're promoting the fight, or if you're talking bad about me, like I'm gonna fight you anyway. So that's just is what it is. I'm not phased." But he might legitimately be bothered by what he feels like is John lying about him, which is interesting. So we've had a year of this fight, and all of the buildup that's really interesting about this fight has been in the last week, which is really interesting before you even get into the X's and O's. Did you have anything on that before I go into my like X and O?
I do. And
Okay, go
to
ahead.
like for what you were saying about I think there's two things that I don't think here's my thing with it. I don't think John or Stipe is necessarily lying. I think they both can be right in this situation because I think of how it was perceived, right?
Mm.
Um, I know there's two things John had a problem with what Stipe said, and there was like two things that Stipe had a problem with John said. I think it's just it's fight week, everyone's amped up, adrenaline's on 1,000, you're taking you're tense, you're on edge, you're like, oh man, it's legacy for legacy. Where I think that like that comment about, oh, if my kids don't think I'm like a jerk, right?
Mm.
Then that's okay with them wherever. Like John Jones, we all know he's the greatest of all time, right? We all know it. Everyone knows it. But also, it is well documented John Jones's reputation outside of the ring, right? Like his
Mm.
what like a reputation or like his history with like outside of the cage. And I think
Mm.
that outside of this fight, if Stipe would have said that outside of fight week or whatever, or said it in a different scenario, I think that John Jones wouldn't have probably have noticed it. But I think that because they're about to fight, I think John Jones might have heard it where as like a subliminal shot, like, okay, we're about to fight each other, and you say, oh, you wish you had more credit, but as long as your kids don't think you're a jerk. Are you talking about me or like all the stuff, whether it was all the run-ins with the law John has had in the past? So I think he could have taken it as like a subliminal, like, are you trying to like what's going on here? And then
I mean,
John Jones said he was gonna beat him up, and then Stipe was kind of mad about that, like beat his ass or whatever. And then like Stipe called him called him a bitch or whatever. And then John Jones was like, "Hey, I think both of them thought that this was gonna be very respectful, but I think they might have just got caught up in the moment." And then both of them think like, "Hey, what's going on here?" Right?
mm.
So I think that could have been both because even during the press conference, both of them were kind of like, what's going on here, right? Like they had that kind of feeling about it. But I think that outside of that, even with the Tom Aspinall thing, right? To your point, I think that it is interesting how well of a fan response Tom is getting from the crowd. And
Mm.
as a fan of Tom Aspinall, I'm happy for him. I think this is amazing, and I want to see his, see him do well as a champion. And I do think it would be nice if he got the shot. But I do think he's been a little heavy-handed in his approach with getting the fight with John, because if we're being honest, right,
Mm.
the fight, if I'm John or if I'm in John's corner or in his team, the fight with Tom Aspinall does nothing for John Jones. Does nothing for his career, does nothing for his legacy, literally, and like does nothing for his team, right? Like, as a fan of John and a fan of Tom, like as if I'm Tom Aspinall, I can definitely see why you want this fight, right? Like you want to fight the best, you want to test yourself as the best. You are the best heavyweight currently, and you want to test your best your skills against the best ever, right? Which is totally understandable, right? And I know a lot of people are saying that like, oh, he deserves the fight and he deserves this or deserves that. But if we're being honest, John Jones doesn't owe anybody a loss. He doesn't owe anybody anything really. Like after a decade of being a fighter of mythical proportions, right? Again, like we said, actually I realized I got it wrong in there earlier, but like 15 title wins, right? Or like yeah, 15 world titles, 16 title like wins, right? You got you're on the record books as the youngest champion ever, oldest champion, two division champion, most finishes in the UFC history, right? You've beaten a plethora of Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers, champions, legends in their own right, right? You've your last 16 fights have all been world title fights, right? You've kind of put on this decade of dominance, fighting through three generations of the best martial artists on the planet, right? Giving 16 men have tried, 17 men have tried, 17 men have failed, right? Where you've given a lot of people chances. You fought through the who's who of your generation, the next generation, and the generation after that. If you look at all of John Jones's fights, right? If he fights Tom Aspinall, if I'm John Jones, right? If I fight Tom Aspinall, or if I'm his team, fighting Tom does nothing. Even if he like John Jones, I think John Jones would win that fight. But like when you put that in his amongst his body of work, right? Against the Rampages, the Machitas, the Rashads, the Gusterson, the DC, the Smith, all these fights. I don't think Tom Aspinall falls in John Jones's top 5 wins. Like if he were to win against Tom Aspinall, it wouldn't land. I personally don't think it lands in John's top 5 wins ever. Because then you look at the Gustafson fight, right? That was legendary, right? He pushed John to the limits. I think that goes in. I think John will put that in his top 5. You look at the rivalry he had with DC, best rivalry in the UFC history, in my opinion, right? That's another really big win for John. You look at the match with Reyes, fighting up into the next generation. That's another big win for him, right? You see the moment where he beat Shogun to become the youngest champion ever. That's another big win for him, right? You look at the Rashad Evans fight, like that, they were both teammates. That's another big win for him. You have all these different fights, the Glover fight, you have the Machida fight, you have a litany of things that even with Cyril, right? I think the fight with Cyril made sense where Cyril is or was when John was coming up into heavyweight wanting to test his skill. Cyril was touted as the future of the heavyweight division. And we all know I'm a big fan of Cyril Gane, the biggest supporter of Cyril Gane and his skills, and I think he will be a future champion. I think that there was a lot there, right? Okay, you're moving up. You are the light heavyweight king, undisputed, and you want to move up to heavyweight. You want to test yourself against, like, there was a lot there, right? France's first champion. He's like touted as like the future of the heavyweight division. He's been clearing out the division, like just putting on masterclass after masterclass, right? It's charismatic. People love him. Got the striking. A lot of people thought he put up a challenge with this and that, right? And then when he beat Cyril, I think Cyril definitely in the moment was overwhelmed, with because you're 3 years into your MMA career, 4 years into your MMA career. You've main evented multiple UFC events. You sold out like the stadium in France and blew the roof off the arena. You've headlined that event multiple times. You sold out like every crowd you've been in France, right? Like as far as like the events they've had in France, that he was part of the first event in France. There's a lot of accolades that come up, right? Where beating Cyril was a big moment, but I don't even think the Cyril fight goes into John's top 5 wins because there's so many there. So, and I think that like with Tom Aspinall, right? I think Tom Aspinall's better. I think while that fight would be cool and I would enjoy that fight, and I understand why he would want that fight, after everything John has done for the sport and giving 16 other people the chance, I really don't think he owes anybody a loss. Like I think he beats Stipe. And I think the fight that makes more sense is the Alex Pereira fight, right? They're both the same age. They're both double champions. They're both have decimated multiple champions across different weight divisions. You know what I mean? Like they've got the accolades. I think that John's more interested in legacy fights right now. And if you're going for what's going to be in that next top five, what's going to be, wins that are going to be impressive that means something to you, right? Because John has all the money in the world, right? He has all the titles in the world. John has enough money to be very comfortable, right? He has millions. And then
We
also,
assume,
yeah, we
but
assume,
like
but
he's been in a lot of legal trouble, and that's not
that's
cheap.
true. That is true. But also, like, he has all the titles in the world. It's safe to say he's made a lot of money in his career. You know what I mean? So
Right.
what does Tom just being objective? I'm a fan of Tom Aspinall. I would like to, if this fight does get made, I would like to see it happen because I think it would be a great fight. But realistically, what does Tom Aspinall have that would interest someone of John Jones's caliber? You know, I
Well,
think that
I could make an argument for it if you'd like to hear it.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, so as much as Cyril was the fight at the time, I think that given how that's aged and that Cyril already had losses, uh,
One loss.
yeah, one loss to Francis and Francis leaving the company, I think that if we're going for if John Jones wants to leave his legacy that he is the pound for pound greatest who proved it pound for pound, I think that he needs Aspinall. Only because the heavyweight portion of his career, when put into context, is going to look weird if it's just Gane and Stipe, and or having Pereira come for an unprecedented 3 division championship status. It's if he doesn't fight Aspinall, it leaves a question mark over the heavyweight portion of his resume. But if he has Aspinall, I think that is enough between Gane, Stipe, and Aspinall. That's enough to say, okay, if you beat all three of those guys, you beat the current generation of heavyweight, which would mean you've cleared out multiple generations of light heavyweight and the current generation of heavyweight, as well as the previous generation in Stipe. So even though there's like a slight age difference, I think that what won't age well about the fight coming up is just the layoff time for Stipe and the conversations around where Stipe was at and what he might do after this. Because it seems from every report and account that this is Stipe's last fight. So it's going to be a pretty easy argument for people to say, well, look, that was Stipe's last payday, and how much was he really taking it seriously? He was a full-time firefighter at the time, and he had a 4-year layoff. What Stipe's last fight was 3-4 years ago.
2021 against Francis. Yeah.
Yeah, so almost a full 4-year type layoff. It's as much as John's coming off a kind of 2-year one, I think. His is injury related, not like semi-retirement. It seems like with Stipe. So the Stipe one will be big as a resume point, but it can't be the main hinge of his argument up at heavyweight. He needs another one. And it has to be Aspinall because Aspinall is the kind of next generation heavyweight, it appears. He's never lost to any of the previous guys. He's avenged the loss to the guy he had of his generation, which was by injury anyway. So it's And it looks like, I mean, Dana said as much in, I don't know what podcast he was on, but he went on a podcast and he said, if John Jones retires, Aspinall will be made the undisputed heavyweight champion. So Dana's putting pressure by the things that he said. And he also outlined that he wants it to be, if John wins, John's next fight would be Aspinall. And then if he beats Aspinall, then you get the Pereira fight, which to me, that is the correct layout for the end of John's career. Because John definitely doesn't want to hang around too long and just fight guys for the sake of fighting guys. If you're thinking about what's the best fights that you could put together for A, his legacy, and B, for his wallet, because I don't know what other ventures he has outside of fighting. But I mean, after his next like 3 fights, it seems that's going to be calling a career, and pro athlete career to like his next career. There's going to be probably a pretty big discrepancy in income. So his last big paydays that are going to have to sustain him and his family and his investments and all that stuff for the rest of his life are going to be his next like 3 or so fights. So Aspinall has proven that he's got the fans with him this week. I mean, they're chanting Aspinall during the press conference. I didn't think that he was that over with the fans, but it appears through a combination of everything he's done and how much John has not entertained that talk this week. Aspinall's over with the fans. That fight's going to be huge if they put it together and John wins this weekend. So, and then beyond that, the most bookable star that the UFC has is Alex. He's in there every few weeks. It's if you're asking a casual, like maybe they wouldn't know his name, but if you just showed them like his face or a picture of him, I feel like pretty good odds that they would say, "Oh, that's like a UFC champion guy." Like they know him by sight because he's just had so many huge moments and knockouts that get spread everywhere that end up as big sports center deals that cross over, that you'd be booking someone who's getting chance at MSG in your fight week and then the biggest star that the company has. So, and again, I still haven't talked about this fight this weekend, but I just think Tom and Alex represent the answering of the final questions that we have. Because if you look at the rest of the heavyweight division, no one else is going to put their name forward between now and 2026. It's not going to happen. There's no one coming up who has any quality wins or could get any quality wins that you would say, oh, he's the next guy. Like there is no next guy to arrive.
See, I see your point. My only pushback is, or the few pushback I do have is, what makes Tom any different from Machida? From a Machida, right? I'm a fan of Machida, as we all know, and I'm a fan of Tom, right? As I've said before, but Machida and Tom are right now both, like, Machida was champion, or like when was a champion, right?
Mm.
Tom Aspinall is the interim champion, right? Machida wasn't the first champion from Brazil. Tom Aspinall is not the first champion from England. Both are fan favorites, right? Like during their time periods, right?
Mm.
When John Jones beat Machida, in the moment it was big, right? But like when you look at John's whole body of work, Machida doesn't really fall inside of John's top 5 best wins. Right? Like, it's just like they played the thing of him choking him out and he falls to the ground and whatnot, but like when now like what was that fight? Like maybe 10 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, right?
Mm.
But when we think about John's body of work and we talk about his like the fights that meant like that were really notable in his career, no one brings up that fight, right?
Mm.
And I think that 10 years from now, I know we were saying like John's not trying to fight anybody just to fight, just fight people. But I
Mm.
feel like that's what would be that fight to Tom Aspinall. That fight with Tom Aspinall, it would just be another Machida, like just another name in his like list of people he's beaten. And I don't think 10 years from now, at this point in Tom's career, I don't think 10 years from now people are gonna like when you talk about all the people John has beaten. I don't think Tom Aspinall makes that top 5 list of like most notable people John have beaten. I think he makes like the top 10 list, but like who's really going outside of like hardcore fans like us or like, you know what I mean? Who's really going through a top 10 thing of like, I think Tom Aspinall would just kind of be another dude on the list, just like Ovince St. Preux, just like Anthony Smith, but
Oh,
I think higher than that. I
come
mean,
on,
like,
though.
I'm not
I mean,
saying
he's
that like,
talking like, oh, it's Tom's
you know what I'm
been
saying?
interim
I,
champion and defended it. Like that's how
yeah,
long he's been interim champion.
that's what I'm saying. It's like
And he's
Machida.
spoken all these like it's since he's been in the UFC, he hasn't made it past the second round. Like Tom just gets in there and gets it done. And the only loss he has in the UFC is to Curtis Blades, and that was by freak like knee injury in the first round.
And yeah, and he is special. I'm not denying he's special. And like I said, I am a Tom Aspinall fan, and I would like to see good things happen for him. But just when you look at John's body work, what makes him different from Machida, though?
I would say
And
I think that
in the scope of John Jones's like legacy.
I think that once Stipe and John are out of the way, I think Aspinall is the clear best heavyweight in the division, and I think that he'll be that for years to come. So I think you're talking about like champion with a bunch of title defenses, a guy who is undefeated in the UFC, aside from one injury loss, which he avenged already by KO, and he's 31 years old. He's not even. It's not like he's a 35-year-old where you go, oh, this guy's got a couple more years. It's Tom Aspinall could have a a generational run at heavyweight. I think he is this generation's heavyweight. I think he could have a 5-year run. It's assuming he beats Cyril Gahn. I don't see how anyone else beats him. There's just no one out there for him. The grapplers can't get him down, and he just touches everybody on the chin once and they go out. He's 31. He's undefeated, barring the one injury loss, and he's the interim champion. And as far as what it would do for John, and why I also think John wants to put as much time between this fight and that fight, is that he would be by far and away the biggest physical challenge John has faced. It's he's 6'5", 250 pounds. That would be by far and away. It's Stipe weighed in at I think like 248, and he is how tall is Stipe?
Stipe is 6'4", but
Oh,
Tom and Cyril are the same height and weight. Because Cyril is like 6'5", 6'4". I think he's 6'5".
let me check that.
But I know Cyril's like around like 250, 260.
One sec. The well-roundedness of his game compared to Cyril, and also Cyril's older. Cyril's 34. He's 6'4", 250,
I mean,
according.
like, there's the 3 years older, you know?
I know, but he's also a guy who transitioned late and doesn't have the well-roundedness of Aspinall. The things that to me is exciting about Aspinall is he has those characteristics of a guy who can be head and shoulders above a division for 5-10 years. I just don't see how the other guys catch up to him. Specialists aren't, especially in the heavyweight division, you can't really be a specialist and get to him because you have to run through heavy hitters. So if you're, unless you're gone, you have to have that type of movement to avoid the big, heavy hands to even get up to him. And then if you're a wrestler, as we've seen with Curtis Blades is the best wrestler in the division. He has been knocked out a bunch of times because he has to enter that space in order to get off his best offense. So I just don't see anybody signed to the company who is as well rounded and at a high level as Tom Aspinall. So, and Francis isn't coming back. John's close to the end of his career. This looks like it's going to be Stipe's last fight. And so you're looking at the only questions that I can even mentally create for Aspinall is Jones, Pereira, and Gane. If Tom Aspinall were to beat those three guys, I think he just rips off an undefeated record for 5, 6, 7 years until
And see,
somebody else comes along.
I would agree with that. I think that if he can beat those three, I think Tom goes on like a magical run, right? Where because I don't see if he were to beat those three, I don't see anyone else beating him, right? Like the heavyweight division, I do think that it is Tom and Cyril Gane and Tom Aspinall stand at the top of it as the new generation fighting forward, right? And I do think that I think the fight to make is Cyril Gane versus Tom Aspinall because likelihood that John Jones and John Jones and Stipe retire after this fight, right? And I think you do Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane for the vacant belt because the fight because Cyril and I feel like that's the fight that that needs to be made because I feel like Tom Aspinall, fought Curtis Blades, but I think that that is the fight to make. And then I think that the fight to make is John versus Pereira.
Well,
But
the
I think that
complication with that is Tom's the interim champion. So if you want
true.
to make the Jones versus Pereira fight, Jones has to leave the division and go down to 205
And
in order for that to
this
happen because it's next fight for Aspinall has to be for undisputed gold or he has to get it as soon as this fight's over.
see, and that's the thing, right? With Tom Aspinall, right? I really don't. I think that because I see what you're saying. Like, hey, people he needs this fight, but also I think as for John, I really don't think John needs. Where I think that a lot of people are saying oh, this is the biggest heavyweight. This is the biggest challenge. This is the one that needs to be done because if you beat Gane, who's in that same generation as Tom Aspinall, right? He was the champion before Tom. He's already been there, done that, already beat the current best of that generation or group, right? And then goes on to beat the heavyweight goat of that division. I don't think you need a fight number 3 in order to clear it out. You beat the top 2.
I think
But
there's a possibility that because John's playing a weird game where the future of what his opponents do matters a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna say before you said that. One of the things I would also say is I think that it's one of those things that I think once you reached unparalleled greatness, right? You reach an Anderson level, you reach a GSP level, you reach a insert person name, right? People are always gonna be looking for who's next, right? And for a better part of a decade, everyone's been I think John so great that a lot of people, his entire career, has always looked at who next, right? When he beat Shogun, they were like, well, this guy. Okay, you beat Shogun. Okay, how about Machida? Okay, you beat Machida. Oh, well, Rashad Evans. You know what I mean? Then, after, they'll build up every person, right? And then, right as, let's say when, Jones beats, I'm probably getting, the order mixed up, but, you beat Rashad, and they built him up, right? And then they're as soon as he beats Rashad, they're like, well, Glover is the next guy. You know what I mean? And like for the better part of a decade, right? Or in the 14 years that John's been doing this? For 14 years straight, people have been saying this next guy, this next guy. And they're saying Thomas is the next best thing, right? And I do think he is the next best thing. But it took 16 years to find the next the I guess I feel like if I'm John Jones, this is 16 years of me, 14 years of me hearing, oh, this guy. Oh no, if you really want to prove you're the best, you gotta fight that guy. Or if you want to really prove you're the best, you gotta fight that guy. And you keep on beating all these people that people keep on saying is the best ever, or this is the one that's gonna prove how great you are. If I got 15 world titles and I'm a champion in different divisions, I beat the heavyweight GOAT. I beat one of the best of this current new generation. And also on top of that, I win at Madison Square Garden. I think if someone would want to, like, let's say if we're taking names out of it, it's not even Tom Assa, it's just another guy. Because to John Jones, it is just another guy. If you're coming, you gotta come home and be like, hey man, da, da, da. You gotta bring something that's gonna entice me to want to come back. You know what I mean? Because really, it's someone going, oh yeah, well, if you don't fight, we're just gonna make this guy the undisputed champion. If I got 15 world titles, I could care less. You after I beat Steve Day, you getting this DX chop, and I'm walking off. You're gonna be like, well, you gotta fight me now because you really want to prove out you're the best. Oh, I am the best. DX chop, and I'm walking off because like if you are the greatest, right? If you are the person who is the like literal best, right? Like let's say you are the middleweight GOAT, right? Because I think we're both around middleweight size. If you have been the best middleweight for the past 14 years, right? You are reaching unleveled, like mythical status fighters. And we talk about the legendary Super Saiyan Charles Oliveira, right? We're talking about Blonde Oliveira. We're talking Gilbert Burns with the Afro. All these mythical fighter, right? And whoever's hot right now comes up and says, if you really want to prove you're the best, you got to beat me. You've been hearing this for the last 14 years of your career. What makes this person different from every other Joe, guy who comes up who is hot in the moment and say, yeah, this and that? You know what I mean? You got to come.
If John wanted to just have the legacy of being the greatest light heavyweight of all time, I think that after this fight he could retire easily. But the problem with that is, if you want to have legitimate, like, heavyweight kind of bulk behind your argument, because this will only be his second fight at heavyweight.
But you beat the GOAT. Wouldn't that give you legitimate heavyweight credentials if you beat the greatest heavyweight of all time?
Yes, but there's a lot of things with Stipe, and this being Stipe's last fight, that kind of put some clouds around this. And also, if John were to walk away, and let's say John and Stipe both retire after this fight, Aspinall becomes undisputed heavyweight champion, and he fights Gon and then Pereira, and he beats both of them, and there's like a 5-year reign of Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall will have usurped Stipe Miocic for GOAT, because if the argument when Stipe was crowned the UFC heavyweight GOAT was that he had the most title defenses that anyone's ever had.
4 title defenses, yeah.
I think it was 3 before he lost to Daniel. Let me see.
Because it was Verdun, it was DC, Francis, and I think there's one other guy, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so he won the belt off Verdun, the Overeem defense, JDS defense, and the first Francis defense. So
yeah, so that's 4.
But you win the belt and then you have 3 defenses.
Oh yeah. But then he beat Francis too. So I think, like, wouldn't that count?
Francis was the 3rd title defense. That was when he beat him by
DC.
Decision. Yeah, but he lost the first DC fight. That's why we had the trilogy. So he loses to DC, wins versus DC to get the belt back, and then
And then
has
the
the
third
one
fight.
defense. So even if we're usually they're counting in a row, but even if we're counting
Uh-huh.
out of a row, he's got 2 times heavyweight champion and 4 title defenses. I think that if both those guys, if John and Stipe were to leave the division, okay, you're talking about Gane and then Pereira. He will have already those would be 2 defenses because Dana has said that he'll be crowned undisputed if John and Stipe both retire. So his first fight would be a defense. So those are 2 defenses. He only has to win 2 more fights to equal the total defenses of Stipe. And he could do that in what, a year? 18 months?
Technically, right? Like he could go on a run like that, but I feel like the Cyril is not a guaranteed fight. And I think Cyril beats Tom, if we're being honest. I give it
I don't know about that.
60-40. I think
I'm
like
gonna need
this
to
is just
see a
me,
like Vegas book about
right?
on that one.
I think it's a close fight, right? I think that's the best fight at heavyweight to make, right? After John and Stipe, because I think it's 50-50. If I'm being objective about it, I think it's a 50-50 split. But I think me being such a big fan of Cyril, I'm saying 60-40 because I think on the feet, Cyril beats like Tom on the feet, right? When it comes to striking, because I don't think too many fighters can hang with Cyril on the feet if we're just striking back and forth. I
Mm.
think on the ground, it's like 70-30 Tom. You know what I mean? Because Tom's jujitsu is just next level. And like compared, if we're talking about like we haven't seen much, like we know Cyril's got submission offense and he's got some submission defense, right? Because he does have submission wins. But Tom Aspinall's been doing jujitsu since he was like 16. Like he's like was teaching adult classes at 16. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
I think that like, and we do know Tom Aspinall hits hard, but we've also seen Derek Lewis hits hard, and Derek Lewis could only hit Cyril 2 times across 3 rounds or 2 rounds across 10 to 15 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes. Derek Lewis could only hit Cyril twice and couldn't, and none of those shots were clean. And Cyril hit Derek Lewis 110 times between 10 minutes. Tai Tuivasa hits hard and is a one-hitter quitter. And he almost put Cyril away because he punched him and made him fly across the cage like a Tekken movie or like a Dragon Ball Z movie. But Cyril showed he got that dog in him where he can dig deep, and he hit him with that Street Fighter 6 ultra combo, that 12 hit, yeah, 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 da, 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 da. You know what I mean? Where, but I think that like Cyril he's shown he could be in a dogfight and be in a firefight. You know what I mean? And he can also make it put on an elegant masterclass of a striking battle. I think that over this time, while he's been in Hollywood film and movies, I do think Cyril Gahn has been working on that wrestling. I think that fight with John and the fight with Francis has definitely shown him that, like, hey, we need to work on this wrestling. We need to work on this jiu-jitsu, right? Defense. And I think that if you're as someone who has such a high ceiling, like a high potential and high like growth potential, right? Because I think Cyril has potential to be one of the best heavyweights ever, right? He has the charisma, he has the striking, he has the footwork. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we've seen him get some submission wins, we've seen him go the distance. So he's not like oh man, I'm just like hell on wheels and I'm going 1,000 on the dash. You know what I mean? 0 to 1,000. He has the cardio and the grit, that dog in him, the big dog. You know what I mean? To go all 5 rounds, going into championship rounds, going 3 round things, but he can also put it away. You know what I mean? I think that Cyril has fought against guys who are known as one hitter quitters and has either made it look like they're not in the same league with him, or that he's been there and been in the fire, been in the trenches to really be like, hey, we making it happen. Who, we closing the door, who's coming out on top,
It's I do agree that that's the closest fight that could be made at heavyweight. I still would favor Tom in that pretty decently. But I mean, we will be able to see more from Gon. He has a fight for
Volkov.
Volkov in December, so we will have the opportunity to see more of him, and if Volkov will take a different approach because they've already fought once before and it was just a regular kickboxing fight and Gon predictably won that.
You know what's crazy, right? With that Alexander Volkov fight, they've already fought once.
Yeah.
And if I think Volkov's main skill is that he's a really good kickboxer. But if you're going against an elite kickboxer and you want to make it a kickboxing match, Cyril clears Alexander Volkov again, no problem, right? We saw when he was going against Francis, first 3 rounds, Cyril was winning in a striking exchange. I feel like striking with Cyril is like the equivalent, not the equivalent, but similar to trying to have a striking match with Alex.
It's a
You're
little bit
gonna
different.
lose. Huh?
It's a little bit different just in that the
Yeah.
reason to not strike with Alex is
He
that
can put you away with one strike.
right, is all of his strikes
And his fight
are
IQ.
damaging.
Yeah.
It's if he's
One
just
leg
touching
kick,
your leg will be compromised soon. If
2 strikes,
if he's touching your body's going to be compromised soon. If
one
he's touching
strike.
your head, it's over soon. It's the thing with Gon is that he does it more in a death by 1,000 paper cut style.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's touching you and he's touching you, and nothing, kind of like Holloway, nothing is overwhelming except the volume is.
Yeah, if you're getting hit with 110 strikes by a guy who's 6'5" and 265, like, yeah, they're not going to be like crazy, like, oh, one hitter quitter Tom Aspinall punches. But if you're taking 110 strikes from a guy who's 265 and 6'5", eventually you go and wilt. And we kind of saw that with certain fighters where eventually there's only so much you can take. But I think he is more of a technician in that part of it, whereas like he's not known for crazy knockout power, but he's known to just like the volume of how much pressure he's gonna push on you is gonna be a lot. And I think that I know you're not supposed to look past an opponent, but I think Gon clears Volkov. Like they said that with Spivak. But Gon after the Jones fight cleared Spivak. Like, bro, what are we talking about? And then
Yeah,
I think he clears Volkov. I think Tom Aspinall and Cyril are where Stipe and Jones are compared to the rest of the division. Because I think it's Jones and Stipe at the very, very pinnacle. And then underneath that is Cyril and Tom Aspinall. And then those two are leading the rest of the heavyweight division by a country mile. Because I don't see any person that's beating Tom Aspinall in that division other than Cyril, because Tom has the striking, he has the grappling, he has the cardio, he has the submission offense and defense. Like when you line up the heavyweight division, right? Tom Aspinall has one punch pop, one punch knockout power. He has very slick jiu-jitsu. You put him against Curtis Blades, we saw what happens. You put against Spivak, I think he clears Spivak. Pavlovich, he cleared Pavlovich very quickly. You know, you put him against Ty. As much as I like Ty Tuivasa, he's clearing Ty. As much as I like Derek Lewis, he's clearing Derek Lewis. And by that point, we're already on like 7. So, and beyond that point, Volkov, he clears Volkov. I think that there's a new guy on the come up. I think his name's Jonta Silva. What's his name? The new heavyweight. Let's see, what's his name? Go ahead. Let's see.
Okay, you can look for that.
Yeah.
I would just say it's, to me, I'd be interested in that fight, but the reason that I think John needs it is he's playing a weird game of trying to look into the future. And I think if you're making a bet on the future of the heavyweight division, the clear favorite is Tom Aspinall. And he could end up taking that best UFC heavyweight of all time from Stipe. And when people look back at it, I think the context of this being Stipe's last fight and the possibility of them looking at it and say, oh, he had like a 4-year break between that and he had already lost to DC, and that whole possibility might kind of muddy the waters as far as Stipe being a good bullet point on John's resume. I think that when we look back in 5 years, I think that if he manages to beat Aspinall, I think that that win will age like fine wine. I think that that'll be such a good win. I think it'll be a better win than anyone except for probably DC. DC is probably John's best win, and I would say if he can beat Aspinall, that's his second best win.
That one I'm gonna have to disagree on because I think John's top 5 best wins is Alexander Guff's. It's DC, right? We both agree that DC is his best win.
Yes.
And then I say after that is Gustafsson because that fight was insane.
Okay, well, I'm
Like,
just talking about the
and then
guy as the resume rather than
yeah,
the individual performance in it, because like you never know how a guy is going to perform in a
true.
future-looking fight. Like he could have a great performance or a bad performance and still win, and it would still be a huge win in my mind.
When you, and then on top of that, right? Like I think that it's like DC, Gustafsson, Reyes, and then I would say Shogun, and then after that, I say Rashad. The like of
I
like
mean,
John Jones's best, like his best wins,
do you
just
mean like
because
the way that John performed in the fight, or do you mean like adding to his resume as a guy?
I think that when you look at it, I
Hmm.
think both because Rashad Evans is in the Hall of Fame, so that means you have a dominant victory over someone that's in the Hall of Fame, right?
Hmm.
DC's in the Hall of Fame, so you have a dominant win against another guy that's in the Hall of Fame. Gustafsson, the fight between Gustafsson and John Jones is also in the Hall of Fame. So that means you have another dominant victory
Right, that
over like
fight
a Hall of
is,
Fame.
but
Yeah,
Gustafson,
but
it's kind of hard to tell because he was clearly underneath DC and John.
that's true. But these, I'm just saying, like when you look at John Jones's resume and you look at how his performance was in those fights, those are all like 3 Hall of Fame level like fights, right? Jonathan Ray, like not Jonathan Reyes. What is his name? I'm sorry,
Dominic.
Nick Reyes. That one I think is another really big fight for him, right? Because that was like I think that amongst the two. So what have I already said? That's and then Shogun. That's another win over another Hall of Famer that type guy, right? Another dominant victory over a Hall of Famer, right? I think that 10 years from now, a decade from now, right?
Hmm.
I don't think Tom Aspinall, whether John fights Tom Aspinall or doesn't fight Tom Aspinall, I don't think it makes that much of a difference in John's like resume. Just because, like, hear me out. This is what I'm saying, right? Tom Aspinall is at this point in his career. Tom Aspinall may go on to do phenomenal things, and I hope he does, right? And I think he will. But as of right now, like 10 years from now, if someone said, "Oh yeah," like if John decides to go, "Hey, DX Chop, hey, you said I have to go fight you," oh, word? That's crazy. I'm retiring. Hold that L for all of eternity. I don't think 10 years from now, no one's going to really care. And then 10 years from now, let's say if he does fight Tom Aspinall and wins. Tom Aspinall, I think Tom Aspinall just becomes another name on the list, just like Cyril Gahn will become another name on the list, right? Where both of them are interim champions. Both of them were either close to like had dominant runs, right? Like think about every person that's on John Jones's list of people he's beaten. All of them had dominant runs leading up to John Jones. Machida was on a dominant run. Uh, Anthony Smith was on a dominant run. Like, you know what I mean? Like Dominic Reyes was on a dominant run. Shogun, Glover was on a 9-fight win streak. You know what I mean? Everybody was on like dominant runs before they come to John Jones. So I think like 10 years from now, it's not going to really matter that much. Just because when you look at John Jones's overall career, he is the greatest of all time. You know what I mean? He's littered across the UFC record books, the history books, where amongst all of John's accolades and accomplishments, another fight against another heavyweight, no disrespect, it's not gonna matter that much. Just like another fight against another light heavyweight isn't gonna make any big swings in John's career, right? Like if this is a situation where Tom needs John more than John needs Tom, like a win over John for Tom Aspinall changes his entire life. You know what I mean? This is career defining stuff. If you are the person that beats John Jones, the mythical, legendary, holographic shiny card, shiny Pokemon card, it's like, I think you win that. It's like getting a holographic shiny Pokemon card, right? You're the one of few who have such a thing, right? Like for Tom Aspinall, beating John Jones is like finding the One Piece for all of my One Piece fans, right? If you win, and for Tom Aspinall, beating John Jones is like becoming Hokage of the village for all my Naruto people. You know what I mean? It is becoming a Pokemon master, right? It is life-changing, life-altering things, right? This would change the trajectory of Tom Aspinall's career for the rest of his career, right? He could retire off that win, or he could take that momentum and become an international superstar, right? Right? Like we can both agree a win over John Jones for Tom Aspinall would change his career, change his life. But a win over Tom Aspinall for John Jones, minimal changes, minimal differences. You know what I mean? Like it's just like, okay, here's another Pokemon badge. You know what I
I
mean?
think
Like
in the moment you're correct, but to me, when you look at who's a guy who's going to be a future UFC Hall of Famer, I think Aspinall is firmly in that list. I don't think Dominic Reyes is a future UFC Hall of Famer.
I don't think so either.
I don't think Thiago Santos is going to get there. I don't think Anthony Smith's going to get there. I don't think Gustafson's going to be there. I don't think OSP is going to be there.
Yeah, he already retired.
I don't think that Glover's going to be there.
I think he is.
I think he might for the fight. Like he might have a fight in there, but as him, the fighter, I don't think that he's going to end up there. Just over the course of his career. I already said I don't think Gus is going to be there. If they were going to put, I know they put the fight in, but I don't think Chael himself is in the UFC Hall of Fame. I think it's the fight he had with Anderson Silva.
But I think that you can kind of.
I think if they were going to put him in, I feel like they would have put him in already. I don't think that he's going to end up there. I think Vitor will be. Rashad is. But we start to get back to, I mean, the part where we talk about the guys who are the legends that he fought to kind of give himself that status, they're all in like 2011 and 2012, where he ripped these off of Vitor, Rashad, Lyoto, Rampage, and Shogun. He ripped all of those off from 2011 to 2012.
Devil's advocate, right?
Mm-hmm.
I will say, after he went on that like legend run and he was full on Randy Orton legend killer out here, people was like, oh, you should give the next people their shot. You know what I mean? And he did give the next two generations of the best fighters on the planet their chance. They said, oh man, you should give, Glover's on his way. Hey, give Glover a shot. He gave Glover a shot, did it. Give Maleta a shot. Give Thiago Santos a shot. Give Dominic Reyes a shot. Give Owen St. Preux a shot. Give Anthony Smith a shot. Give this person a shot, give Chael a shot, give this person a shot, and he said yes for 14 years in a row. He's never said no, and
No,
he's
look, for
taken on
sure.
all comers.
He's the best 205er ever, for
No,
sure,
I think he's all
100%.
best fighter ever.
I
Like,
know, but it's as we get like
mm,
further on in history, it's going to be a more complicated argument because there's guys who have really good like the resume that Taporia is putting together right now is insane. He's beat two of the featherweight GOAT candidates, and they're both in their prime, and he knocked them both square out. Like
oh yeah, like
Taporia's resume that he's putting together right now is completely insane.
yeah, I would say Taporia's on his way to becoming the best featherweight of all time, right?
I mean,
And I
he might
think that
already be there.
yeah, right. Like you beat two of the three best featherweights of all time, and I think the same for Tom. I think Tom will be. He has the potential.
Mm.
I can't say he will be yet, and I don't like same as for Cyril. I think both Cyril and Tom have the potential to become the best heavyweights ever. I think that in order to become the best fighter of all time for like Tom or Cyril or whoever in the future comes along, I think you're gonna have to pull off 16 title wins in a row, 17 title wins in a row, because the current guy who is the best in the world, the best ever, has 17 times. If let's say if Tom Aspinall or Cyril Gahn or like Alex Pereira or whoever's or Tatsuro Taira or Raul Rosas Jr. is one of these new guys can rattle off 17 title wins to seven. Oh, I feel like you put him in the conversation of like, oh, this is the new greatest, fighter of all time. But I think it's gonna be maybe 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now before
Right,
we
but that's
ever
the
see
thing
someone like John Jones
is
again.
the title that John most covets is a title that A doesn't exist and B is always changing based on the future. So I think the reason that the Aspinall fight is important is because if you want to future proof the argument if you're John, you have a chance to get this guy now. Because if you leave, there's no guarantee anyone else is going to come and do it. So if you think that you have the capability to do it, you're 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 one chance to end this argument now, which is for some reason super important to you. I don't really get it, but for whatever reason, being known as the best UFC fighter or the best fighter ever is something that really matters to John Jones to the point where he gets really upset if any other name is posted or mentioned. So if you want to have that title and not be annoyed 5, 10, 15 years from now when people are saying another name, you have the chance to eliminate maybe your greatest competition potentially. Again, this is all in potential because we're future forecasting here. We don't really know until it happens. But this is your
Oh, you kind of froze. Uh, in the meantime, like you were saying, I can definitely see that where like if you're looking at the future, right? Like, hey, if you get this future chance to do this and do that, but I think that's also kind of like saying like, hey, there's might be a guy a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, who might actually be able to do it. Might be something. But I think that when you're looking at his whole body of work, I think that's why John may be like, oh man, this or that, get really annoyed by it just because this is looking at his entire body of work. So I for all of you at home, I do that's kind of where, as you see, we're both on different sides. Conflict management, name of the podcast. But one of the other big fights while we wait for Don to go back is Charles Oliveira, the legendary Super Saiyan Charles do Bronx Oliveira, a living legend in Brazil, a living legend across the world, superstar, against Iron Michael Chandler. This is a fight that is fireworks. It is the things that dreams are made of. You have two very exciting fighters with very exciting fight styles. One has the record for most submission wins in UFC history, 16 submissions. And Michael Chandler, who has won multiple fight of knockout of the nights, submissions of the nights, had the knockout of the year for 2023 against Tony Ferguson. The giant punk kick heard across the world, you know. So that is an exciting matchup between future Hall of Famer and living legend Charles Do Bronx Oliveira and Michael Chandler. You're back. So I was just keeping the show running. You know, as they say, the show
Appreciate it.
must go on.
Yes.
No problem, because you've done that for me plenty of times when my Wi-Fi would not let me be great. So I was just like, it took me a second to realize. I said, I wasn't sure. I was like, is this one of those moments where my Wi-Fi is going out and I just can't tell yet? I'm gonna randomly get like booted off the screen, or is it the vice versa? And I was like, either way, I'm gonna just keep on going, keep the stay on the bicycle, you know, keep on pedaling until I'm gonna get kicked off or I'm gonna be on the main screen. So I kept on going. But like we were saying, I was gonna say, you had mentioned this is all potential. This is all like, hey, if you want a chance to beat this guy who may or may not become the best heavyweight of all time, I can see that. But I think for John Jones, the reason why he gets annoyed, right, is when you look at the body of work he's done already, and then there's always gonna be someone in the future who may or may not become great. It's like, hey, this guy a year from now, or this guy 5 years from now, may or may not become the dopest thing since sliced bread. You might want to catch him now before then. I think that will always be the case, because after Tom Aspinall, right? Let's say John Bay fight, right? Let's say they do. Let's say this is all marketing on John Jones's behalf, where he's just like, I just want to play mental warfare. I just want to get inside Tom's head, right? Which is very possible because John Jones is a troll. Once he beats Tom Aspinall, or if he does, right? I guarantee you, I think we can both agree on this, and I guarantee you without a shadow of a doubt, once that happens, two things will happen for sure. After they beat Tom Aspinall, they've been like, oh man, if you want to prove you're the best in the world, you want to get your chance to say you're the best heavyweight, they will say, oh, now you got to fight Alex Pereira. Because if you really want to prove you're the best ever, you want to prove you're the best this, you got to fight Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira he's the same age as you. He's a champion in two different divisions. He's got all these knockouts. He's got this, he got that. Or maybe a new heavyweight comes along, right? And they're going to be
I
like,
don't
oh,
think there'll be a heavyweight. I think that
I
if
mean,
he gets
this is all
through,
hypothetical.
I know, but I'm just saying it's just given the time scale
Yeah,
of
that's
between
true.
like now and when those fights would happen. I
But
just think
do you
there's
think
no time that a new heavyweight's going to step forward. If he
true?
beats Aspinall, that's the current heavyweight generation taken care of. No question will need to be asked.
But do you
I think
think that
that,
afterwards they'll say like, "Oh, you got to fight Alex Pereira. If you really feel like you're the GOAT, you're this, you're that, you got to take on Alex."
well, I would say yes, but I would also say he should want that fight because, like you say, Alex is the same age as him. They're of the same generation. It's to me, if you're John and you want to leave no stones unturned, all questions answered, those two fights answer all the questions that we could possibly have. Because if you just look at the rankings, how are you going to argue against those guys? Because you'd be fighting the guys who cleared out their divisions. It's at this point, Alex has one other fight that's not a rerun of the top like 10 guys. It's
Yeah, which is
we had
insane.
to get number 8 to come up and fight him. And now we're looking at like maybe a guy in Ankalaev who
He does not stand a chance.
yeah,
I'm sorry, but
when they make that fight, I expect the odds to be tilted pretty heavily towards Alex.
Mhm.
And once again, when once Alex comes through that, what do we do with him other than move him to heavyweight? There doesn't seem like there's a lot left for him there. There's not like a young guy. It's Rakic keeps losing in an attempt to get up there, but it's not really a strong argument to say, oh, but not Rakic. Well, Rakic couldn't win the fights to get up there, and Alex is beating the guys who beat Rakic. So would he really stand a chance? Probably not. And the rest of the guys, you're looking at them and going, uh, like no one's really standing out and making a super strong argument at 205 that they even deserve the fight, let alone they could win. Uh, so to me, if you're John, you look at it and you go, okay, Stipe, Tom, and Alex, and then if you manage to come through that run, there's no questions left to ask or that could be asked. It's everybody else who anybody could put forward would have lost to those guys already. It's all the heavyweights have lost to either Gane or to Aspinall. All of the light heavyweights who you haven't fought yet because you moved on have all lost to Alex. So you sweep up entire generations of fighters in these three fights because you get it's not a great argument, but he'll argue, and pretty successfully probably for most fans, he'll argue that if he beats Stipe now, that hey, I would have done this earlier anyway. We eventually did get this fight, so I absorb all of his kind of like John's doing like a perfect sell kind of thing. He's saying I absorb your JDS win. I absorb your wins against the other heavyweights that made you the kind of consensus UFC greatest heavyweight of all time. I absorb all those victories. And then when he beat Gane, he's like, I absorb all of the victories you had against these other heavyweights. And then if he can get Tom, well, now you've basically beat the whole heavyweight division by MMA math. And then if you add in Alex, that's everybody that has built up a name since you've left 205. So you would have essentially absorbed all of the victories from both weight classes for like how long has Stipe been there? I'd have to look when the Stipe like run was, but I mean that's like a 10 year period where you're basically making an argument that you could have ruled both weight classes at the exact same time.
You know what's crazy, right?
Mm.
What just dawned on me? We have done literally what the entire MMA community has been doing for the past month in this past hour. We've talked about John and Tom, right? Like what is the ramifications of that? John and Alex, Tom and Cyril. We've talked about every person except for John and except for the two people who are actually fighting this Saturday, John and Stephen. We've overlooked Stephen this entire time. Most people have, that's been all the talk this weekend, right? Like, people who are in the Tom Aspinall camp for being like, oh, you gotta fight Tom next, right? And then other people who are in like the camp like me who've been like, what does Tom do for John's legacy and career, right? Like John is the best, and then being like the other people who in the camp of Cyril versus Tom, or Alex, and no one has like, and everyone's been skipping over like John's just gonna clear Steve. It just dawned on me just now. I was like, oh man, we have done literally what has been going on this entire month, like, and literally what I've been thinking, right? Because when I saw the betting odds, right?
Yeah.
It is like Stipe is like a plus 625 underdog, which is, in my opinion, an insane. Even though I clearly think I think we both think that John Jones is gonna beat Stipe.
Yeah.
But still, even then, I feel like that's a bit heavy-handed for a goat versus goat matchup to say one of the goats on the side of the card is going to be a plus 625 underdog. I think, even though I think John Jones is going to win, I think people are overlooking like how close this fight is going to be, in my opinion, like overlooking Stipe. And like,
I think that there's two kind of big factors in that, which is the last thing that we all saw from Stipe was his loss to Francis. So his last fight out was 3 years ago and almost four, and he got KO'd super stiff by Francis in that fight. So you combine guys coming off of massive knockout losses combined with guys who have 3 almost 4 year layoffs, and I think that it's just everyone's expectation of what Stipe is now, I think has diminished a bunch. I don't foresee any way where John finishes him necessarily. Like I just based on everything I've ever watched from Stipe, I don't believe he's going to get finished in this fight. But at the same time, I don't know how he's going to possibly start quickly and be in rhythm. It's almost 4 years without doing it. He has other responsibilities. He went from a part-time firefighter to a full-time firefighter. And his last fight, he got KO'd stiff. So even if he was just a year removed from that KO, I think most people would go, "Oh, well, he's going to start slow and be kind of timid and not really want to engage that much." But when you combine that with a 3 year layoff, I think people go, okay, well, those are two not good factors. And then you add on top of it, you're 42 years old. And so I think people are like putting those three together. And most of us are just kind of going, what are the odds that this guy whose last victory was in 2020 against DC, who is now, it feels like DC's been retired for a long time now, just because he's been on broadcast forever, and you just associate with him in that way now because every other week it seems like DC's on your TV talking. He's not fighting anymore, and he hasn't been fighting for a really long time in your mental memory, you know. So I think there's there's a little combination in there also of DC's probably underrated as a fighter.
he's severely underrated in my opinion.
And his broadcast career involves being a very likable
He does a
guy.
great job as a commentator.
Yes. So he's the kind of, because of A, his history of being a fighter, and B, how prominent he is within the product. DC is the face of the UFC other than Dana White. Like when you think of the product itself of the broadcast and who are you going to see, it's DC does Contender Series, he does fight nights sometimes, and he does the pay-per-views. So odds are good if you're tuning into anything that the UFC is doing. And he does the weigh-in show, and he does
Oh, it's such a great show. It's
that
a great time.
that I forget what it's called, but like the TV thing that they do with like Lorosenko, DC.
Yeah, the
Um,
Wayne show.
oh, is that what it's called?
Yeah,
Okay, so there's that. There's all the studio segments that involve
good guy,
DC.
bad guy.
Yeah, good guy, bad guy. They have the DC's breakdowns, like
Yeah,
all of this, uh, like third, like shoulder content that goes with the product itself. DC's all over that. Like, so most people don't remember, and because John was always in his way, people just forget kind of how good DC was. So I think his last win was DC. DC's underrated. Uh, his last,
severely underrated.
yeah, his his last fight was a long time ago and was a KO loss. And then he just doesn't, like it or not, Stipe doesn't do media. He doesn't enjoy it. You could tell
At all.
he would really prefer to just fight and not be involved with the interviews and the questions and all this stuff. You could tell he would love it if he could just fight in Cleveland every few months and he would just be at home with his wife and kids and then he just gets a call like a week before maybe. Hey, we're going to need you so and so weekend to fight. And then he just drives to the arena, gets in his shorts, fights, and then drives home. Like he would love it if that's how the sport was, but it's just not the case anymore. You can't just it's you gotta take a part in all these responsibilities and stuff, and that's why I think honestly that probably contributed to the layoff also, as well as just recovering and all that. Is just like he doesn't love the game for that part of it. He likes the fighting stuff, but the whole piece of the game
The
he doesn't
media, the
enjoy.
fan,
Yeah,
yeah.
and you got to go through that week in order to get to the fighting part. So I think when you add those like 4 or 5 things together, I think that's why everybody's just kind of like, yeah. And he's already told us, not in so many words, because again, he's refused to say it in media interviews. He's been asked like a couple times, and he wouldn't say one way or another officially. But everybody assumes that he's done after this one. So there's no storyline that we can build with him after this anyway. So it's all of us are just kind of going, yeah, let's check this box and then we'll move on because we know Stipe is not going to be here.
And also, side note,
Mm.
I was just thinking about this. Stipe and John Jones are very close to the same age. Like they did I think if I'm math was never my strongest subject, but if I think I did the math correctly, I think the same difference between Cyril and Tom is the same difference between Tom and not mean Tom, Stipe and John. Because what Stipe is like 42
Mm-hmm.
and like John's like 38,
37.
37.
Yeah. So it's a 5 year gap.
Okay, 5 year. I had three. See, it is also 11 o'clock at night, and math is not again not the strongest subject, but but I think that yeah, it's not that far of a difference, right? Like you said, Stipe does not like doing media. That dude would. I think the if he could just be on the Apex card that was like a fight night in Cleveland, he would be more than happy with that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He because I think he enjoys the actual fighting, but not the actual like media and talking to journalists and the doing the interviews. And he's just like, bro, let me just put on some gloves and let me go fight, right? But back to your point about the DC, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, the reason I also feel like he's severely underrated, and I do agree with you, he does a great job as a commentator. And I think the reason why he is so underrated as a fighter, I'm glad you brought this up because I've been telling people this for like years now. How underrated DC is or was as a fighter. And I think the reason he is so underrated is because he came up in the same era as John Jones, right? When you have two top tier people, right? John Jones is such a generational talent, like of mythical proportions, right? When you have a guy who's as successful, as dominant, as just this like superstar, this unicorn, this phoenix of a, you know what I mean, of a fighter, right? This uh anybody else is gonna look like it's gonna be the B side of that thing. You know what I mean? Like if we look at it, right? When you think about it, people just think, oh, DC, yeah, right? But really, when you look at DC's accomplishments and the things he's done throughout his career, they're all extraordinary things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only did DC win a medal in the Olympics for wrestling, if I'm not mistaken, he won bronze, right? So that means he was the third best wrestler on the planet, not just in the UFC, not just at a like on a state level or country level. Like on of the 7 billion people walking the earth, he was the third best wrestler. Left, went to Strikeforce, became champion, right? Fairly late in his career, like he was already like 30 something. Goes to the UFC, goes on a run. His only losses, if I'm not mistaken, are to John Jones, the greatest fighter of all time, Stipe, the greatest heavyweight of all time, John Jones again, Stipe again, and I think one other person at most. So his only losses, to my knowledge, in the UFC is to the greatest fighter of all time and the greatest heavyweight of all time, and maybe one other person. But not
No,
only
it's
did
just those two.
yeah, so DC's only losses through his entire UFC career was to the greatest fighter of all time and the greatest heavyweight of all time. Other than that, he has beaten everybody. It
By the way,
became light heavyweight champion,
not
became
even just
heavyweight
his
champion.
UFC career. That's Strikeforce too. His whole entire MMA career. The only two losses he has, well, two people he's lost to. It's three total, but it's John Jones and
Stipe Miocic.
that's it.
And went on to become light heavyweight champion, went on to become heavyweight champion, one of nine or one of only 9 double champions, 2 division champions in the 30-year history. One of 9 in the 30-year history of the UFC, and also a Hall of Famer on top of being an Olympic champion. And then I hear some people have the audacity to be like, "Oh, DC mid." What about everything we've just named is mid? You know what I mean? Like, it's just because he just came, like, when you have two extraordinary talents come up at the same time, that's like, yeah, I feel like it's gonna happen. And he does such a great job at commentating that I feel like a lot of fans who are just joining now, they just know him as DC, the really good commentator dude. And they don't like know that this dude was that guy for a large part of his career, majority of his career, his professional career, from wrestling all the way into MMA. Very underrated. I just have to put that out there, like, because literally, if they, I think you put DC in any era of the UFC, he goes down as one of the best ever in the light heavyweight division. If you put him in any era that John Jones wasn't in, he goes down as the greatest light heavyweight. You put him in any era that wasn't Stipe, that what Stipe wasn't in, he goes down as the greatest heavyweight. That is such a crazy thing to like wrap your mind around. That like, but going back to the Stipe thing, with Stipe and John, right? Even though I think that people are overlooking Stipe, I think John's gonna win, but I think they do, or they are overlooking him. I think it's gonna be a lot closer of a fight than people think it is going to be. I think John Jones is gonna get the win. I think he's gonna get the finish. I think it's gonna be like maybe a 4th round finish, right? And the reason I say that is John Jones, like Stipe. Like, well, let me just start with Stipe and now go into John Jones, right?
Mm.
It doesn't, you don't become the greatest heavyweight in UFC history for no reason, right?
Mm.
He does, even though he does not look like it. Like when you see a champion, right? You see Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson look like a champion, right? He got this accolades of a champion. You just look at him and you got the charisma. He's got the look. He's got the build. You look at Canelo Alvarez. He's got the charisma. He's got the build. He's got this. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? You look at Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre, John Jones, Cyril, Tom. You know, they all look like, oh man, I'm out here. Like they look like when you say champion, that right,
Mhm.
even though he doesn't look like it, Stipe was a Division I wrestler in college. John is also a very elite collegiate wrestler.
Yeah, JUCO national champion.
Exactly. Stipe is a Golden Gloves boxer. John Jones is also a very talented striker. Stipe has a very high fight IQ. John Jones is probably the most cerebral fighter in UFC history outside of like George St. Pierre. The like, because when you, I feel like you saw it a lot where like in DC's fight, in his fight with DC, right? Like, especially
Mhm.
like the like that during the trilogy where they saw they had like was having success with the like the body shots where they were coming up and immediately he putting DC on the fence, right? Like they noticed in the first fight, okay, when DC was going like when he was going for the underhooks, when he would try to separate, DC would catch him, right? That's how he knocked out Stipe the first time. He got into the underhooks, when they got off, DC caught him with some punches, was catching him on the way out from disengaging from the clinch, right? Got over the arm and then hit him with the hook, right? And dropped him. In that second fight, in that other fight, you see a lot of it where they when they're going for it, Stipe is pushing the pressure, right? He's getting him in these hooks, right? He's going for those body shots. He's going for the like every time like when DC would go up and kind of like get those arms out and try to like get out there. Stipe readjusted, noticed it, and it was in the third round by the time all this happened. That this sequence happened, third, fourth round. Stipe notices the hands going up and he goes, boom, rips to the body. Boom. It just kept on ripping to the body and would hold his hands up there and be like, okay, you gonna leave that out there? Yeah, and kept on and readjusted that quickly and notices it over like, okay, you're gonna he's gonna every time he does his hands gonna go up, boom, 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 right? Then when you see that striking coming in, you see that in the third fight where like he's adapting, he's getting better. We saw like he has fast hands, good counters, right? We saw that in he's good off the back foot. Stipe is a live wire, right? Like he's going to put your lights out if you let him. We saw that in the Verdum fight. He's good off the back foot. Verdum's coming, pressure, 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 strike, strike, strike. And Stipe caught him, stunned him with the like step back hook, right? And then while Verdum's pressuring him, he's trying to throw punches. Stipe was backpedaling and said, Yagata! and put Verdum's lights out. He made Verdum fall like in a very cartoonish manner. Because he hit it was like he hit Verdum and made him look like he slipped on bananas in Mario Kart. The like where you see that happen and you see him come with the good counters like he did with Verdum, with DC, Francis, and then and also on top of that, he has very strong hands. Like he's coming, if he's got that one punch power, right? When you're looking at the knockdown ratio or the knockdown average, Stipe has a higher knockdown average than John Jones, right? He has more knockdowns than John Jones, right? I think if I'm not mistaken, Stipe has 7 knockdowns compared to John Jones is like 5 or 6. When you're looking at he's also the stronger, more powerful puncher. Like he's known as a knockout guy, but he's not just like, hey, I'm just like this 40-year-old dude with a 42-year-old dude with a dad bod out here just eating potatoes and just punching to put people's lights out. Like, but so I think it's a lot closer than people are giving it credit for, right? But then on the flip side of that, right? Stipe does have seven knockdowns compared to Jones's 5 or 6. But the flip side of that is Stipe's been knocked down 5 times. He's knocked down people 7 times, but he's been knocked down 5 times. John Jones has never been knocked down in his entire career. And In 23 professional fights, John Jones has never once touched the canvas. Oh, like, but when you look at it, John Jones he is not known for being a knockout guy. He's not a one punch power guy. He's, if you ask anybody, he is the greatest of all time, but he's not known as like, oh man, I'm just coming to knock your lights out. No, he has a higher striking accuracy. I think of like 60 or 58% or 64% or something like that. But John Jones, while John Jones may not be the best boxer because he's not known as much, he is the best at putting all together all the different aspects of mixed martial arts, being cerebral, being able to change his game plan. I think being cerebral is one of John Jones's greatest assets of being able to switch his game strategy on the fly. He has one of the highest fight IQs in all of combat sports. There's been many of times where John Jones has a strategy going into a fight. It doesn't work out, and he changes it on the fly. It is very hard for fighters, at least from what I've seen, and sometimes even like when you're in the fight, when you're like, you're going up there, you're like, whether it's wrestling, kickboxing, whatever it is, and you're in the match. Sometimes you've seen that with fighters, right? Where they have a game plan and they go to implement that game plan. It does not work, but they continue forth with that game plan. And you're like, what are you doing? You clearly that's not working to work. And they go, and it's almost like they're like, well, I brought a screwdriver. Screwdriver not going to fix this problem. Well, I only brought a screwdriver. So I guess we're just going to make it work. And it's just like, okay, no, we've seen John Jones be like, okay, you don't need a screwdriver? Cool. Hiya, you know what? I got a Swiss Army knife. You know what I mean? Like in my back pocket. And I could have used it at a time. You know what I mean? We've seen where like John Jones will come up here and you go boom, 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 boom. And then because he's such a longer, rangier fighter with an 84-inch reach, which is insane, I think the longest in UFC history, when he comes up and people want to close that distance, because he's such a rangier fighter, he may not be the best at trying to like box in that range. So he's going to use those elbows and like crack you on top, crack you on the way in, right? Which is a great use of the elbows, where he's going to hit you with them elbows and make you double think on that entry, right? But even on the plus side of that, he's got those unorthodox elbows coming over the top. He's coming up here. He's coming with the strikes. He got the kicks. He got the teeps. He got the oblique kicks to the knee, right? And even in this is where I think where John is also the most dangerous is if something's not going well for John closes the distance, right? Or he feels uncomfortable. He's feeling like uneasy. He's going to close the distance, right? Where we saw that in a number of fights, right? Where he closes distance, gets tight. Like we saw Cyril's known as, oh man, if he can get moving, the legs, the footwork gets moving, it's going to be dangerous, right? We saw it with Ty. We saw it with Derek Lewis. He immediately went in, I think when you're in the fire and you're like pushed against it, you're going to go for what your core is. And at his core, John is a wrestler. You know what I mean? And you saw him go for that like double leg immediately and got the submission. And once he got in, he has a nasty front choke. You know what I mean? Like he got it Machida with it. He got Cyril with it. I think that when we're gonna be watching it, I think it's gonna be. Oh yeah. Also, to what may negate that D1 wrestling experience is John Jones has a near perfect takedown defense like percentage. John Jones has a 95% takedown defense percentage, which is insane compared to Stipe's 68%. 95%.
But it is more difficult to fend takedowns from people who are bigger than you, even if you do have really good takedown defense and technique. It is going to be more difficult over the course of, and especially because I think we both agree, John's not going to finish the fight. So over the course of 25 minutes, can Stipe just have a moment where he either tricks John or does something surprising and ends up on top of him or in like a takedown? That's what it in my mind. It's so easy based off of what we've seen from Stipe and what skills we know he has to build a case that he could win the fight. But then all of the kind of doubts that I have about how long the layoff's been and the knockout of from Francis before and all of these other factors and things that come into my mind, they always just end up being like, but can he though? Like, is he? Like if you were making a guy who could go through that, I think it would probably look like Stipe. But I just can't ever allow myself to think that, oh, it's gonna happen, just because the other stuff seems so much more. Like when you're weighing, you're doing like the scale weight thing
Yeah, yeah.
of like, okay, how much to give here and how much to give there. It just feels like the layoff and the loss and the retirement and all of this stuff feels like it weighs too heavy compared to his skills. And that's ultimately why I think that this fight needed to happen, because there is still enough mental question that I do want to see it. Like I've seen some people who are especially like experts say Stipe has no chance and John's going to win this easily. And as much as that might happen, I still want to see it just so I can know. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I feel like
because
we'll be glad that we got this fight, regardless
oh,
of how it
absolutely,
goes.
absolutely. Because I think to say Stipe has no chance, even though again, even though I am going for John Jones, and I do think John Jones is going to win this fight and still be the greatest fighter of all time afterwards, and beat the guy who is the greatest heavyweight of all time. I think it's almost borderline disrespectful to just say, "Oh, Stipe has no chance," because, like you were saying, if you're going to build a fighter to have the best chance against John Jones, I think that person is gonna look somewhat like Stipe, right? Like you're gonna need someone who has that one punch knockout power, because chances are, if you don't, I don't think you're gonna be able to out technician the technician. You know what I mean? Like to be able to out technique John Jones, I think is gonna be a Herculean effort. But if you do have that one punch knockout power, you increase your chances by a lot, right? Like if you could just say, "Oh man, I could just land one punch," I think, or and then also you're gonna need someone who has that a strong wrestling background, because if John's last fight was any preview into his heavyweight, uh, was it I forget journey, I guess, for lack of better words, he went straight for the double A. John Jones is a wrestler at his core. He's a phenomenal striker, but he is a wrestler at the end of the day.
Mm.
And you need someone who can defend that wrestling. You know what I mean? Stipe has the D1 experience. You need someone who can strike, who has that championship experience, right? Who can go that 25 minutes, who also isn't too pressed about the John Jones aura. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like Stipe's been here, done that, got the T-shirt, has been the champion, has been in multiple title main event title fights. So he's not like, this isn't his first rodeo. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Compared to like when it was Cyril's like, oh, this is the thing, because a win against John Jones changes Cyril's entire life forever. You know what I mean? That
Mm.
is life changing. This, for only 3 years in, and you got to fight against the greatest of all time, and people are touting you as the next, like the future of this division. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone who's fairly like new to the organization. But
Mm.
for Stipe, this is just another day in the office. For John, this is just another day in the office. You know what I mean? Like they've both been here before. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I think that for someone, I think to write off Stipe as someone who's just, oh yeah, he has no chance, I think is almost borderline disrespectful to Stipe and like what he's accomplished so far. But I do, again, all that to say, I still think John Jones beat Stipe. I think it's just going to be probably closer to a fourth, fifth round because Stipe is a knockout artist, but John is a technician. John may not immediately go for the finish, but he's going to work his way. It's like a Rubik's cube. He's going to keep on turning the cube until he can get that combination. And once he sees the opportunity for a finish, I think he like goes after it. But he's just not gonna like Michael Chandler his way into a finish. Like, I'd be surprised if we saw that.
Yeah.
But if Stipe wins, that's the greatest upset of all time.
Okay. Well, I will say we spent almost 2 hours talking about
Yeah.
the top fight and a bunch of fights that don't even happen on this card and may never even happen. So I just want to spend like a few minutes talking about
Yeah,
like the other main card fights because
for sure.
there are some interesting ones, although I do find it
Absolutely.
very weird that this is one of the biggest pay-per-views of the year, and for
Yeah.
whatever reason, a lot of the matchups are by betting odds really one-sided.
I have seen that, and I think when you look on paper, it does look that way, right?
Mm,
When we look at the main card, right?
mm,
At least I can see, I agree with you. I think that when you look at it on paper, a lot of these fights seem one sided. At least I could see why they would think it's one sided, right? When you look at John Jones versus Stipe, I think the majority of the MMA community is going to say John Jones, right? You
mm.
look at Charles Oliveira and you look at versus Michael Chandler, the legendary Super Saiyan Charles Dubonx Oliveira, or like Iron Michael Chandler, depending on whose side, which camp you're in, you're gonna say, I think that like I could see people saying either Charles Oliveira because Charles Oliveira is beloved by the entire MMA community, right? I think that depending on who's the favorite, I could see someone saying like, "Oh, Oliveira all the way" or Chandler all the way, right? But I think it's Oliveira, in my opinion. I think Oliveira wins this fight. When you look at Bo Nickel versus Paul Craig, I feel like the safe bet, the safe choice is Bo Nickel wins this fight. But I'm hoping Paul Craig pulls off the upset victory because I think the underdog story of like the first Scottish person to fight at Madison Square Garden. He's at a new weight class under the brightest lights. Under this is WrestleMania moment stuff right here. You know what I mean? Like, hey, you're the first Scottish dude to ever fight at MSG, and you're fighting against a guy who's considered like a wrestling prodigy and like the belle of the ball, I guess you could say, right?
Mm.
And you could play Party Crasher and really set the party off. You know what I mean? If you can pull off a major upset, right? Going into Charles Oliveira crazy fight, right? Like I think that it could be. I think yeah, I think that would be crazy, right? But I think a lot of people, I think most of the MMA community is going to choose Bo Nickel, right? But I'm
Mm.
hoping Paul Craig, you know what I mean? But I do think Bo Nickel's going to win that. You look at Viviana Arujo versus Kareem Silva. Kareem Silva has a 77% finish rate, right? I think that like of 20 fights or 22 fights, no, 18 fights, right? She has like 9 finishes and like 6 submission wins or some crazy like that. Like I think she has the like the highest finish rate in like flyweight, right?
Also,
Um
I don't understand how Araujo is ranked so high,
yeah,
considering she's lost 3 of her last 4.
yeah,
I mean, she's 37 years old. Like, I don't know. This one seems like one of the most obvious ones
yeah,
on the
right. Like
card, in my opinion. Like, Silva should win this all day.
same. That's why I have winning this. And I
Yeah.
could see most people's leaning towards Kareem Silva based on like what she's done and like how she goes in there to get the party started, right? Like she's
Mm,
going in there for the finish, she's going in there for an exciting fight. I don't think that fight's gonna be boring. Another like the beginning of the fight card, like the beginning of the main card,
mm,
Mauricio Rufy,
mm,
another one of the fight nerd guys. everybody a part of that fight camp. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of that whole fight camp. You know what I mean? With Kyle Bahio, you know what I mean, as like the leader, leading the charge for the fight nerds. Mauricio Rufy is one of the, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the fight nerds, right? 10-1 record on the Contender Series. Exciting dude. You know what I mean? I think that James Lone Top. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that right.
I think the double
I
L in Spanish makes like a Y sound, right?
I think so. On top,
Yes. Yontop, I
on
think
top,
is how
on
you
top.
say it. But like he's lost 2 in a row
Yeah,
in the
I
UFC.
think losing a third one. I think he might, then they might start talking about whether or not to cut him. And but when you
Mhm.
have such a surging young prospect against a guy who's lost 2 in a row, I think the fight nerds are on. They do such a great job on the game planning and like the popularity with the fans. I think that most people are going to lean towards Mauricio Rufy. I think he's going to get the party started and really bring in another win for the fight nerds. So it
Yeah.
does look very one-sided when you look at it on paper, but there's also the chance for a lot of people to play spoiler. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, I
my
get it, but I think we're gonna have the exact same pick. I'm going with all the favorites on the main card, you know?
same, same. The like John Jones, Oliveira, Bo Nickel, Kareem Silva, and Mauricio Rufy are who I have down, and I think most people have down. But Stipe Miocic, Michael Chandler, Paul Craig, Viviana Arujo, James all have the chance to play spoiler at Madison Square Garden and leave the stadium shocked. I'm hoping, this is just my hope, is John Jones win by finish, Charles Oliveira win by finish, Paul Craig, I think either a win by decision or if he gets the arm triangle, win by like late finish or a decision. Kareem Silva win by finish and Mauricio Rufy win by finish. That's what I think. Mauricio Rufy, Kareem Silva, Paul Craig, Charles Oliveira, John Jones. That's what I'm having. I don't know if yours differs any as far as the hope, because I know what we think as fans of the sport, what we think is going to happen. But I don't know if yours changes as far as like the hope at all.
I would say running through it for a hope. I'm still with Charles Oliveira.
Mhm.
I Part of me wants to see Stipe get like one last one and just like you were saying earlier, give the DX chop on the way out. Like, yeah, in your face, everybody. I'm better than you even thought I was, and I
No,
never.
I could do it. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm gonna, and also like straight up in your face, everybody, and I'm gonna go be a firefighter now, and
Yeah.
that's it. This is the last one you get. Haha, like all of you in your face.
Because Tom Aspinall's going to get into the cage and try to be like, hey, Stipe. And then I feel like Stipe might be like, hey, none of y'all thought I could do it. Everyone's overlooking me this entire fight week.
Yeah,
Hold this L for eternity. Everybody.
yeah. Because if you're Stipe, also, I feel like he has the least reason to stick around of
Yeah.
anybody. Because I mean, you're gonna fight Tom, and that's like a super super tough fight for Stipe,
Yeah.
and you don't even like doing media as it is. So like, what would you be sticking around for?
Yeah.
To me, he's not in trouble with things where you go like, oh, but he might really need the money. Like he has a full time job and benefits as a firefighter. He has
And
like a
he likes his
pension.
life in Ohio.
Yeah, it's
Like,
he just
he's got
doesn't
a
seem bothered.
right? Like literally after this fight, I almost guarantee you he's gonna literally win, lose or draw. He's gonna leave. He's gonna collect his paycheck. He's gonna leave, go back to Ohio, and be with his friends and family. Have a grand time. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna hang out. They're gonna show he's gonna be with his friends and family. And then Monday morning he's gonna go to work as a firefighter and be totally fine because he was totally fine the last 3 years. He was because it seems like he really enjoys his life as like family man dude who's like a local legend and a firefighter. Like, I don't know a person who doesn't like firefighters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I
Like,
mean, so like we're saying, there's a part of me that kind of hopes for that. Just like if it happened, I'd be happy about it. But just for the future storylines and the continuation of the promotion, you kind of need John to win a little bit.
yeah, and
So
even
probably sticking with that.
right, and I feel like for John Jones, I don't think there's much. I don't see much reason for John Jones to stick around. Right, like this is his first fight ever in his home state, and it's at Madison Square Garden, the biggest arena of all time. You beat the greatest heavyweight of all time. You're 37. You got this and that. Like I feel like it's like Masvidal in Miami. There is no. I don't think there is a better send off than you get to fight at home for the very first time in your career at the biggest stadium, at the stadium that everyone wants to fight at, the grandest. This is his WrestleMania. Like you're at Madison Square Garden, you're fighting at home for the first time ever in 14 years against Stipe. If he wins, I really do think, and he's already 37. His kid's already like I think she's in like high school sports. I think she's a volleyball player. I think I'm not if I'm not mistaken. And John Jones, like he's just like, hey, I'm a dad now. You know what I mean? Like he's like, hey, he's been a dad, but he's just like, hey, I'm a dad out here just doing my thing, taking care of my kids, going to sports. I think it's a similar situation to Stipe. He's like, I'm just gonna go home and then be with my family after this and enjoy my millions. So I don't really see. I think both of them end up are gonna win, lose or draw. Are gonna go home after this, enjoy being with their families, and enjoy their millions after such a big pay per view card, and then go DX chop. Either for Stipe's situation, he's just gonna be like, none of y'all thought I could do this. Everyone was saying I was down and out. No one believed in me, and I'm better than y'all thought I was. Ha! DX chop, hold this L for eternity. I think if John Jones wins, John Jones was like, I told you I'm the greatest of all time. I got the win at Madison Square Garden on home turf. DX chop, hold this L for all eternity. I'm going out as the I'm going out. I'm gonna be one of the few to go out on top. Like I think there's only been three people across UFC history that's gone out on top: George St. Pierre, Habib, and most likely John Jones. I think that the I really don't see either one sticking around unless I feel like they're gonna have to offer John or Stipe like $20 million or something crazy. You know what I mean? Like I feel like they would have to offer them an insane amount of money to come back. Because if you're John Jones, what's a better send off than Madison Square Garden in your home state with all your family around, the fans around, and a dominant victory at your WrestleMania? You know what I mean? Like, what other stadium in the world fits a better send off?
I hear you, but at the same time, I don't believe for a second that John's going to leave with Pereira sitting out there. I think that he wants that one really bad. And I think if he has to go through Aspinall to get that fight, I think he'll do it. I think that he wants to take all of that stuff that Pereira's building up, and I think he wants to leave no doubts, especially about 205 with the way. Because I mean, if Alex just stays at 205, he's already cleaned it out. So, and if they're going to keep recycling guys, I mean, it would take a while, but he could in prestige, he could put himself up there in that John conversation, even though like the the time wouldn't be the same and the number of overall defenses wouldn't. The prestige and the way he did it would
Mm-hmm.
at least lead people to have a type of conversation. But as far as hope, I'm gonna go the other way. actually with Charles. I kind of hope Chandler wins for
Really,
this reason. I don't want to see Oliveira versus Makachev again.
I
I
really
don't want to
want
see
to.
that fight. I don't understand why they keep trying to put that fight together. I don't want to see that fight again. I don't understand who at the UFC is like, we need to do it again. Like, why? I don't get it. That I would rather see Oliveira versus Poirier again. I'd rather see him versus Gaethje again. I'd rather see him versus Holloway. Like, I can name 5 fights at 55 I would love to see for Charles instead of Islam again. Like, I know Charles wants the belt and all that, but I would rather give some time between that. If we're gonna have to do that rematch again, I would rather put some fights between it. Let Islam have some more fights against. He's had Dustin, and he's gonna have Sarukian. It looks like, but give him some other. Give him Gaethje next. Let Charles fight some of the other guys, especially
I
that
was,
Holloway one. I would love to see the Holloway one.
yeah, that would be amazing. But you know what? Why I think I would want to see Makachev Oliveira too is
Why?
because I don't. I think that I think the first one. Again, this is just me as a fan. This is all feelings, no facts. Because when I was doing my reason for John Jones being the pound for pound number one, and I'm so glad they actually said that on the program that John Jones is the greatest of all time and pound for pound number one. Because I'm tired of the nonsense, tired of us pretending that John Jones isn't pound for pound number one, and saying that again, no shade to Islam Makhachev, but I'm tired of the like us pretending that like Islam is above John Jones in the pound for pound. The a guy with one title defense in his if I'm not mistaken, one title defense in his division, three title defenses in general against a guy who has 16 title defenses and a two division champion and the youngest champion ever and the oldest champion on the roster, the most finishes in UFC history, one of 9 double champions across 30 years is somehow under the guy who has one title defense in his own division and 3 in general. I don't understand it. And I don't think it's Islam's. I really think whoever is making these rankings just don't know what they're doing. Because I do think Islam is top 3 in the pound for pound thing, but I think
Mhm.
it goes John Jones, Alex, Islam. Because I think as long as John Jones is around, I don't see how you don't put John Jones as pound for pound number one fighter. Like, I just because I do feel like in order to be pound for pound or in the top 3, you have to at least be a champion. Like, that's just I feel like that's the in my opinion that's the prerequisite. So if you want to be in the top 3 pound for pound, you at least need to be the champion of your own division. Islam has that. Islam is the champion of that division. But then also, what have you done at post being champion, right? Alex is a double champion. John is a double champion. Alex and John have decimated champions across multiple divisions. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Exactly. Like going up a weight class. You know what I mean? But I do think that when Charles fought Islam again, I feel like that's all facts, no feelings, right? Like all the stuff I said before. But this is all feelings, no facts. What I'm about to say next is I think if not Alex, if Charles fought Islam again, I highly doubt it would go the same again. I think for the most part, you could say it was a fluke how the first fight ended. You know what I mean? Like it was very quick. He could have been looking over Islam, looking past him, or wherever it is, or maybe underestimated him. I think that if they fought again, Charles Oliveira wins that fight. I definitely think it goes past the first round. I think it won't be as quick as a fight as it was the first time, right? Because he got caught with the hook, and then Islam got on top, got the arm triangle, and then it was over. I highly doubt that happens the second time. And I do think if they ran it back, Charles gets the win. And just as a fan of Charles Oliveira, I want to see him get the belt again and say, and new. And then do it for the fans across the world. Become if let's see,
It
what would
would
he
be
be like?
cool, but
It's a Cinderella story. 2-time. What would he be like? A 2-time, 3-time
that would be
champion?
3 because if you
Uh,
remember, he technically lost it when he didn't make weight in Arizona
oh yeah,
against me.
yeah. So
So,
a
but then he regained it,
3-time
so he'd be 3.
lightweight champion. That's his. He's already a future Hall of Famer. That's just cementing that legacy, man.
Well, I mean, he's a future
I
Hall of Fame for a bunch of other reasons too, like
exactly,
most submissions,
exactly.
its finish rate, all that stuff. Like,
I
it's
just
I would love it if that was the eventual outcome. I just don't like him in a rematch versus Islam, which is why I wouldn't root for that.
mhm.
Obviously, like not Team Bo Nickel over here. You know that.
Yeah.
He's still doing this weird thing. Like I listened to his Ariel Hawani show interview, which even more I was like, I don't understand what this character is at all.
Okay. Can we talk about that like
Yeah.
really quickly
Mm,
before we move on? Because
yeah.
I agree. I listened to the press conference, right? And I listened to his media day.
Mm,
And I don't know I didn't know what was going on, right? I didn't know what, whether it's are you playing, are you because it feels like when he first came in, he was trying to do like the Wonder Boy thing of like, oh man, I'm just gee golly, I'm just out here just, good vibes, Jesus and like uh vitamins or whatever it is, you know what I mean? Like he's just trying to be like, hey, I'm just taking my vitamins, I'm you know doing my prayers, I'm just working hard, right? But then there's these like moments where it feels like he is I think he's I think this is the beginning of him unknowingly falling into that Ian Gary category where it feels like he is got one foot in babyface territory and another foot in heel territory. And he hasn't really fully chosen if he's going to be a heel or a face. And I think that's really dangerous territory if you're someone who's on the come up and you haven't figured out, are you a face or are you a heel? Because I'm all here for, hey, talk your stuff
mm,
and like, say it with your chest. He's got the accolades to say so. You know what I mean? Like we saw that. He's a multi-time collegiate champion, a wrestling prodigy. He's got all the accolades. He fought at he wrestled at MSG when he was 19. You know what I mean? He's got all the accolades, right? But then it was this. I don't know if we saw the same, but like if you saw the media day or like any of the other like interviews he's done leading up to the fight, I think it might have been the Ariel Helwani one where he mentioned someone asked him and said, "Hey, I think it was one of the media people," and they said, "You said, hey, you can wrestle for 9 months, but you won't reach my level of wrestling," which is fair to say. You know what I mean? Because 9 months of wrestling isn't going to really help you a whole lot when Bo's been wrestling since he's been a kid. You know what I mean? Like Bo's lifetime of wrestling against your 9 months, scary time, scary hours, right?
mm.
And then so Paul Craig said, hey, just like, so they asked him, they said, hey, Paul Craig said, just like, hey, 9 months of wrestling won't help him against your lifetime of wrestling. Well, he said, a lifetime of jujitsu, 9 months of jujitsu won't help you against his lifetime of jujitsu. What do you have to say to that? And he kind of mentioned, he said, paraphrasing, but he was just kind of like, I think you'd be surprised by my level of jujitsu because I've been working with what's his name? Gordon Ryan. And he kind of it felt like a paraphrase of like, are you Gordon Ryan? Like, are you saying that you're better than Gordon Ryan? Like he was like, you know what I mean? Like I've been like getting the better or working, getting like, getting either getting the better of going around or really going toe to toe with him. And like kind of that, or just him, they asked him like, hey, who amongst the wrestling, as a wrestler, who do you think is either on your level or kind of close to it? And he kind of was like, oh, I don't care who I fight, but like, I'm just here to fight. But then he was like, also at the same time, there is no one on my level. And like, you know what I mean? Like he would have these moments where he's like, oh, no one's on my level, and then try to save it with a really nice compliment, or he'll just be like, I am the greatest. None of these dudes can like touch me. But also, uh, I guess then he'll try to save it with a compliment and be like, ah, but also at the same time, well, I guess we'll have to see, I'm working really hard. And it's like, either go full like talk your crap or like go full like Wonder Boy. Because there was like a few times where he did say like, I think someone said, hey, the Dagestani wrestling versus American wrestling, you know what I mean? What is the two?
Mhm.
And he was just kind of like, I think the competition we face is different, and like the things that we do is different. I've been just he was like, I've wrestled at Madison Square Garden at 19. Do I need to say more or something like that? And he was just like, I'm been doing this, like I'm the best. However, the it just felt like he'll have these moments where he's like, he's really talking himself and bigging up in himself, and I'm here for it. I think, hey, you should be charismatic, you should talk your stuff. But then it would like right after he's finished, like being like, I'm him. Don't talk to me. Don't chat to me. He'll try to like circle it and back and be like, oh, but also here's this really nice compliment, which I don't know. I feel like it's he got it. Or I would like to see either him have like a Connor esque run of he just because he is the most qualified collegiate wrestler um currently, and I think he is accomplished a lot and done great things, but I would like to see maybe him choose whether he's going to be a face or a heel, and I think that would be good to see. A little bit of a ramble, but I think that before he was moving, before he left, another one of the fights that I think is could be good. Oh, looks like he's coming back, and you're back. And then, so I was just saying I'd like to see where either go full heel or go full face, because I think they said, hey, do you think you're the best wrestler that's ever come from collegiate wrestling or something like to that effect? And he was like, I don't know how. He was like, I don't really like the word greatest. And they were like, would you say you're the most skilled wrestler to ever come over? And he was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely the most skilled wrestler to ever come from collegiate wrestling, right? And I was like, but then he was like, but there's also been a lot of good ones too. I was like, either to go full talk your stuff, but don't try to save it, because I mean, like, also Henry Cejudo, Olympic gold champion, came from collegiate
Mhm.
wrestling. DC, another Olympic champion, came from collegiate wrestling. But I think that like either go full, like, he's got all the accolades in the world for
Mhm.
wrestling. Every accolade there is to have in wrestling, I think he has. You know what I mean? Jordan Burroughs is another collegiate wrestler. You know what I mean? But he's not in the UFC. But I don't know what he's. I feel like he has these moments where he'll like have those moments where he goes full like, I'm cutting these WWE promos, and then he'll try to save it and be like, but I'm still the super nice Wonder Boy guy.
Yeah. So the one I saw was the aerial interview,
Hmm.
and in it, one of the things he said is Ariel had brought up that previously he had said his goal was to be the champion and the top of pound for pound. And then in the interview, he said, "Oh, those aren't necessarily my goals anymore because I don't want to put a cap on anything. Like, I don't want to put a ceiling. So I'm just going to go about the process and try and get better as a fighter in each and every fight that I do. So even uh, if I don't finish Paul Craig early like I did my other fights, as long as I'm getting better, that's all that matters. And that statement makes no sense because if you're saying like do you think you can do those things or don't you think you can do those things? I never know based on what he's saying. Like based on actions, I could tell you he definitely believes that he can do those things. You know, but why does he have to say things where he pretends that he has any doubts that he can do those things? And then I can tell that he doesn't believe it because the way that he said that, oh, I don't want to put like a cap on things. What do you think? Like, oh, once I get to champion of my division and top of the pound for pound list, then I'm gonna limit myself. Like, if you think you're that good, why not just say you're going to do that and then add some other crazy thing in? Like, why
Yeah,
not just say I'm gonna be the greatest ever? Like, I'm gonna pass John Jones or something like that. Like, I I don't understand what he's trying to do at any given moment, and hopefully, the more spots that he has to be in front of the fans, everyone else will also pick up on it, and we can get to the part where whether he likes it or not, he's a heel.
yeah. And here's the thing: as a fellow wrestler, I want to like Bo Nickel because he is a really good wrestler and
Mhm.
fighter. He's a really good fighter. Like he has the potential to be a really phenomenal talent at middleweight, and I want to like him. But his mic work slash interviewing skills leave me confused because I'm like, kind of like you mentioned. Why are you pretending like you have doubt? Or if you are, if maybe you're not pretending, maybe you actually do have doubt, but what you're saying is confusing.
Mm. And also, give us
Because
a reason then. If you have some level of doubt, just say like, "Oh, in training
yeah,
sessions, I'm not doing as well as I thought I would. So maybe this is
yeah,
going to take a lot longer than I thought, or something like that." But he never says that. He says like, "Oh, no, it's been going really good. It's I give those guys a run for their money, and I'm learning off them, and they're learning off me." Like he never puts himself down to be like, "Oh, I'm struggling at any point." No, everything's going great. Well, then why are we adjusting expectations?
yeah, and also yeah, it's like I would, I would again. He doesn't owe the for us the MMA community or anybody like an explanation or anything, but it would also just help me as a person who wants to be a potential fan like know where you are because if you are a heel that's fine. It's like you know what I mean like or if you're a baby face that's fine. I just need to know where you lie and what is it that you're trying to do like you know what I mean
Mm.
there's been heels that people have been a fan of, there's been baby faces a lot of people been a fan of. But yes, if there is doubt, where is that doubt come? Maybe, hey, I'm not progressing as far as, or maybe this is a bad wake up, but whatever it is, maybe it'd be, you know what I mean? Like I'm a wrestler, I'm still learning the ins and outs, the sweet science, you know what I mean? I'm still learning strike and learning box, whatever it may be. But it doesn't really help his case where he's a great fighter. When you see him fight, he has these great performances. But then he'll get on, but his fight performance at it's an A plus, right?
Mm.
But his mic work is like a C minus, where if he could, where he will go up and will say something like that, right? Like I don't want to like put limits on myself, or I just want to get better at this, and then we'll then follow that up with a very braggadocious comment of being like, being like, hey, and which is fine. I'm super here for, talk your stuff and give us a reason to care, right? Or he'll be like, man, I've been doing this since I was 8. This is my second time at MSG. I've been here, came to MSG when I was first 19, right? I've won every single collegiate wrestling trophy, you know what I mean? Or like, I took over the wrestling world and I'm gonna take over the MMA world. Oh man, that's a great promo cut. I'm here for that. But then don't follow it up with, but I am just a guy and I'm just working hard. Like, don't be like, hey man, I took over the wrestling world. I'm gonna take over the MMA world. I'm the best wrestler that has ever came across. Da, 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 da. And you're giving your WWE promo cut and you're really talking your stuff and be like, I've won every award there's been to win. And then go, but I am just a guy, I'm just working hard, man. I'm just figuring out my way. You know what I mean? It's just like, or I have some doubts and then be like, I am the best. I think there's more to be desired. Like, I think that that's the same with Ian Gary. Ian Gary's a really great striker. A really good striker and like potential to be a really good talent at welterweight. Like he is, I think, top 5 potential, but he makes it very hard to like him because I don't know if he's decided whether he's going to be a heel or a face, but he's not good at like he's towing the line between being a baby face or a heel, but he's not doing a good job at either one. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I guess the common feedback I get is great talent, kind of annoying. And I think it's going to be hard to win fans over if you haven't figured out what is it exactly that you're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is he'll have a good opportunity.
Yeah.
In the event, he'll have a high up, good card spot to kind of clarify, and hopefully we'll get some sort of answer as to where he's kind of headed with this.
Yeah, because we're here for it. We're here to be won over. We just need to know. Because, it is funny to be like, I am the best ever. I am the greatest person walking this earth. But also, I'm just a guy.
Yeah, but I think that'll about do it. It's, there's the music.
Yep.
And when we come back next time, we'll have the follow-up. This was the preview. Next is the review. And hopefully there'll be some storylines. We'll get to figure out who's fighting who next. Who is the greatest of all time?
Yeah.
And what do these guys look like? Who's next for the belt? All that stuff. So make sure you guys tune in next time.
Appreciate y'all. Enjoy.
Like, subscribe, comment, do all the things in all the places. Send this to somebody else who watches MMA.
Hope you guys enjoyed it. We enjoyed making it. We're just chopping it up. Just 2 dudes giving our opinions on the sport we enjoy. But yeah, until next time. See ya.